So, as an artist and as an arts organization, I'm wondering if you could tell me about your ethos. As an arts leader and as an artist, what is the undercurrent that drives you to want to create or to want to build organizations that support and that support art? And I'll go with, let's go, Helen, let's go.
No, I was like, please be last. What drives me as an artist? So by the way, this is something I don't know if every artist does or at what point in their career they do, but when at some point you have to make an artistic statement, right? Sometimes when it's a grant or like, what is your personal artistic statement? And the first time I did that exercise, it was a really hard thing to speak to. And then when you get hired on to run other organizations, they want to know, again, your artistic statement. And once again, you're like, oh, I'm confronted with why do I do what I do? And it's it's not an easy thing to answer for yourself. But I guess the biggest things that have always driven me is that I am really attracted to stories that are not my own. And for me, that interest grew bigger the more I worked with new playwrights, in that I had this opportunity to make space for different narratives. And I found it to be electric and exciting to do. And what I was most drawn to all the time were stories that somehow brought about in us, in that collective journey we take as an audience, hope. That sounds really saccharine sometimes when I say it out loud, but I like stories that elicit hope in us in some capacity. That doesn't mean that it's always a perfect bow-tied end of a story, but that something in it makes us go out in the world more connected, more thoughtful of one another, and that we hope for something bigger than what we came in with. And so that's really driven me in my selection of stories, in the way I write, in the way I direct. It's about that connectedness and the kindness and the sort of growth and grace that we have when we collectively feel hope together.
I mean, the theater to me is one of the few places that remain where people can sort of prove to themselves that human beings are capable of like communicating and feeling empathy for each other. There's in other media that we do where we tell stories, in TV and film, there's sort of this veil that can separate us, some of that anonymity that we also feel with like social media and things. We can kind of be safe, huddled up on our sofa with our pint of ice cream, and we can kind of look in, and we can be kind of a fly on the wall into whatever world we want to look into, and we don't have to actively participate in a way. But when you're present in an audience in real time with a story being told by real actors, especially when the performance is truthful and when there's honesty on stage, you kind of can't escape being a party to that event, You're kind of implicated in whatever the evening entails, whether whatever might happen in the story or in the liveness of the performance. And that shared experience, I think, is incredibly rare now. It's one of the reasons that in kind of our musical theater work at Free Fall, we've very much are sensitive to how we augment the sound with amplification, because if you think about it, there's almost nowhere in life now that we hear unamplified sound, right? And there is something completely different about the experience of having a voice that is moving the air, physically reach out and grab the ear of every person in the audience, and physically grabbing hold of that person and shaking that part of them inside their ear, and you're really hearing a person sing. And of course that happens in spoken theater as well, but to me the example of kind of song is so special because we hear each other talk in conversation all the time, but that kind of unencumbered human voice singing, I think, is so powerful. I've kind of gone down a rabbit hole there away from what we originally started on, but yeah, that kind of empathy and that deep physical connection that you feel in the live event of theater, I think, is so powerful. We sort of do things in that arena on a kind of case-by-case basis, and it's about when a play emerges from all the many that we see, right, that's something that we want to do, you know, that we really want to tell this story and work with this playwright. So plays have come to us from all sorts of avenues, you know, just submissions of folks. We've produced several local playwrights that, of course, have a national voice as well. Like we produced Natalie's play, The Buffalo Kings, and that, you know, came to us because Natalie was here and working in town, and she was doing shows with Free Fall as an actor. And as many actors do, was like, hey, will you read this play that I've written? And we found that play that way. We did some of Alicia Harris's early work, who has just like exploded, and it's like won every award, and it's just like her career is like going crazy. And that was a very similar thing. Alicia played the title role in our production of Charles Way's adaptation of Sleeping Beauty, which was the second production that Free Fall ever did. And at the same time, as you were around at that same time, she was just like really doing this incredible work that she does. That's her own like incredible realm of magical realism. And we took one of her plays, Oddly, to the Orlando Fringe. That was sort of a one-person musical piece that she wrote, which was really incredible. And then she had this piece, Riptide, that she'd written, which was this kind of fable about Katrina that required 3,000 gallons of water on stage, but we made it happen. And so it's really about that to me, about like these connections again, and plays that emerge from sort of all the things we get. We also had a play submitted to us through a very different channel that was the kind of play that would come to us with like an enhancement. So it was a play that some commercial producers were interested in doing in New York. So the play kind of came with investment. That was when we did American Monkey. So that was a writer from Estonia, actually, who had been a judge on the Estonian version of American Idol and had written this really bizarre and interesting satire about like competitive reality TV.
Right.
So yeah, things have come to us a variety of different ways. And then we do a lot of work at Free Fall that's kind of original adaptation of things, and those are things that I usually write. So that's kind of a completely different realm to me. That'll be about, ooh, we want to tell this story from literature, or we have this crazy idea for something, and then we'll kind of, you know, build a piece at the theater. But as far as like developing new works that are coming to us from playwrights, yeah, it really finding the play is about sort of the individual story and the individual connection. And then the development process to me is really about us, at Free Fall anyway, is about us really giving the resources to that piece that we would to sort of any of our biggest and best pieces. You know, I think that we need to put resources toward the production, like when the play called for 3,000 gallons of water on stage. Dadgummit, we were gonna have those 3,000 gallons of water on stage, right? And then having the playwright present through the whole process. Natalie can speak to this too from her experience there, but like really collaborating with the playwright and the actors on making the play right then and there, and not like being set in stone on anything. And that requires a special kind of playwright too to get through that process, because everyone in the room in theater always has a better idea, right? And depending on the dynamics, they can either be shared and collaborated on, or kept to oneself, or whatever, you know, whatever the situation is. But it works best when everybody can kind of communicate freely and where there's openness from all parties. And I think, yeah, that's really what I'm looking for in our process.
So I came out of new play development in a much more intentional manner. And some of what you said, yes, I adopt, and some I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it that way. Mostly because I've just been doing it as sort of a new play engine for so long. There's certain things you find along the way that will better serve the longevity of the piece. And so I was an actor for a really long time. Started off in acting, and one of the reasons that I went into leadership was because of new play development, because the more and more playwrights I worked with who said, oh, get Helen for that first read, because as many actors know, there's actors who are phenomenal after their rehearsal process, and then there's those actors that know how to grab something off of a page immediately and make it sing, and those are the people you want in the room for a first draft read, right? Like, because there's no perfect play. So do we have the people in the room who can figure out how to make a rough moment work? Do we want to see if it's actor proof? You know,
Right.
you know. And so that first draft read many times would be you know, when I started in as an actor, it was being invited in by playwrights and directors. But when I took on leadership, then it was very much about curating. What were we bringing in? And those a lot of times were from some open submission festivals, but a lot of times it was direct submission by agent or by playwright. And we had a very thoughtful rubric around it so that people understood what they were bringing to us, and it wasn't just everything. I mean, I'm sure you, like I do, see everything submitted.
Yeah.
Stuff that you're like, why would that person think that this play fits at our space? It's not that it's a bad piece, that it just, do they look at what we do? Why would that fit in my theater company? So those kinds of things. And when I founded the Hub, it was with the intention that at least 50% of the work would be world premieres. So we did have festivals that were very curated, and that was with playwright and agent and managers all helping us to curate those pieces. And then from those festivals, we use those festivals not just for sharing the work, but very much for developing the work. And we were at that point under a company structure, a company member structure. So all of the artists for the Hub would sit in, and we would have these long discussions afterward about the piece. What's the production value needed? What do we think this will bring to our community? What do we think what did we think about working with the playwright this week? Because as you spoke to, relationship with playwright is so very key. And one of the biggest questions that we always went back to, and that I still go back to whenever I take on a new work, is, am I, as the person signing on to produce this piece and many times direct this piece, am I going to make the same play that the playwright wants to make? Because there's no point in moving forward with the piece, no matter how beautiful, unless we're both wanting to make the same story. I've many times looked at a play, thought, I would love to produce this, and then after one conversation with a playwright, realized they see their play so wholly differently than I do that it would be unfair. They should find somewhere that wants to make their play. Because what I care about is not just the success of our development, in which I want them to feel safe and able to take great risks and be very vulnerable. I want all of those opportunities in there, but what I also want is for their play to have another life beyond us. And part of that is putting together a structure where I know, not is it just a rehearsal ready script, but is it a script that I can send off to other places? Could it be a rolling world premiere? Could I help them just line up the second, third, fourth production? Because all too often we world premiere things and that's it, right? That was the big to-do, and now nobody cares. And I love a second production. That's another thing that I'm really, like, if I see a show that's really interesting, I don't care if I have the world premiere status, because it's not been seen here, right? And so it's world premiere here. So I'll take those second. And in fact, many times have been really thrilled. Like we were the second production for Lauren Yee's, it's called The Hatmaker's Wife now, but A Man, a Wife, and His Hat. We worked with Lauren on her second production, which had a lot of changes from the world premiere. And its third had yet another bunch. And this is the thing that's exciting to me about new plays, is they're not done. They're not finished. We're still working in draft. And so there's definitely a structure I give to the playwrights, and I will work per their needs as well. So I'll build the structure with them. But playwrights of any ilk, their greatest muses, including mine, are a paycheck and a deadline. Like they know how to write to those things. All of a sudden it's, oh, I have all the great ideas now because I know I'm getting paid and I know when the deadline is. And so we work to those things, especially because I want multiple developmental reads along the way. And so in those moments, I really work hard to make sure the right director is on the piece and that they've had really great conversations about how they want to work in the room. I make sure that we've supported them with dramaturgy, so the playwright who's been doing a lot of the research is also supported by what a theater might do as dramaturgy on their side. So they understand, oh, the themes in my play might not only be what I'm seeing. A theater might see it differently, and this is how they might work with a community.
We always attach a dramaturg to new plays, absolutely. In fact, Natalie was the dramaturg on American Monkey.
There you go. So all of those things moving forward, and then when you're in the room, that's the time that I'm really looking for actors who know how to ask those big questions. And then when we move into rehearsal, I usually have the playwright on for first week. They can come in more, it's in their contracts usually to be able to come in more, but usually after week one I'm like, shoo, it's time to work. Because what I find is that keeping a playwright in a room, actors will on the fly change lines instead of figuring out if the line is made to work in a certain way, which we would do with any other playwright who was published, right? We would try to honor the word. And I'll bring back, during those times when the playwright's not there, after almost every rehearsal, there's a list of questions for the playwright. We ran into this issue, we ran into this issue. But the main reason I shoo them out is because, and for myself too as a playwright, you tend to be prescriptive when a moment's not working.
True. I can see that.
Yeah, and so you just go, oh, they're not getting this moment, let me rewrite it. Well, you don't, hold on. Yeah. You were after something here. Give us the minute to see if we can really make it work, because I feel like there's such an honesty in first drafts. In fact, there's so many times where the first draft is the most exciting, and they sometimes make it more tamer as they go because they're trying to please everybody in the room. And so I'm trying to allow it to be a little bit dangerous.
What's interesting is I think new plays, whether you're an actor, director, producer, or playwright, when you're involved in that process, it's both exhilarating and terrifying, and it takes a certain amount of guts from the whole team that perhaps a play that has been produced a few times doesn't need you're more of an explorer. We're seeing if this works, the playwright, the director, everybody. And so you're all going in going, it's a little bit like you've got to have to get your bearings. And it's exhilarating, but it's also terrifying. So I always say that I think it's like this delicate art of collaboration. Mm-hmm. And if the collaboration is off in any way, it can be not pleasant.
I'd go so far as traumatized.
Absolutely. I've had one of those. Yes. Yes. So I've had both experiences. My Free Fall and American Stage experience were both glorious in the development of the piece. And I would say mostly because the creation of the piece with the director, and I mean the director of the play. So Eric was also the artistic director, but directed the Buffalo Kings. And then Chris Crawford was the director of the play that I did at American Stage. And Stephanie was very much involved and helped me. We developed that play for 18 months, I think. I was the playwright in residence there for a season, for 2 years. So we got many, many readings of it in front of audiences, amongst ourselves. And I would get to walk away and come back with after hearing feedback from the cast, from the artists, and be like, okay, I need to rewrite this. And that was a gift that playwrights, we don't get that. So to have an artistic home where you can develop something in that way and have that kind of nurturing family it's an incredible process, and there's nothing like it. But I do think that the relationship between the director and the playwright is the most important, because if you're not speaking the same language, mm-hmm. if you're seeing the play in a different way, it doesn't mean you have to agree on everything. In fact, I hope you don't. I want the director to see things that I'm not seeing. That's key. But if you're seeing the play in a way that the director doesn't, it can become traumatizing. It can become like, you're taking my baby and you don't get it. So I've had that experience too, and that is when I've walked away. But I have been in the room for both for the whole time, at American Stage and with Free Fall, for the development and the rehearsal process of the play. And interestingly, what you said about wanting to work out the moments amongst the actors and the director and the playwright wanting to be like, well, I can tell you the answer, like it's that, and you have to know when to let them figure it out and when maybe they do need, because it is your first production and they have the luxury of having the playwright there, then there is this sort of wonderful thing in that collaboration where I can perhaps help everybody involved, because it did come from my messed up head.
Yeah, it requires a special playwright to be able to do that as well.
Yeah.
Like we've definitely had other experiences, more during like developmental reading processes where it's like, maybe we won't get what we need done this week if everyone's in the room the whole time,
Totally.
But yeah.
It's just collaboration itself is a whole other art form. It's so delicate.
It is.
Right?
I've also seen the let's fix this, and I've watched a script that was like ready to hit its peak, backslide because they're trying to write to fix many things, and I'm like,
Absolutely.
leave it alone, we're so close.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the important things is that in like Love, which is wonderful, is that we have readers of many different criteria on there. Like what they love is very different than what I will love. And then when it comes to those final selections, the conversations in the room were from at the most senior level in the organization down to our fellows, right? They were there because they're going to give a very different perspective than leadership sitting in a room putting together what they think that should be. And so I like that challenge. They're also huge advocates for taking big swings because they have not been, they're not worried about the bottom line. That budget is not anywhere near their head. And so they're there to be the brave voice in the room. And I really appreciate that, that energy. And so hopefully, I ask myself that question all the time and I put it out there just so you guys know that I and American Stage as an institution are going to work really hard to not all of a sudden be scared, program scared, and that I will continue to try to program with bravery. Yeah.
Well, you touched on something else I think too that's very interesting for playwrights to think about your rubric that you have for what gets a play, past your first reader to you.
Yeah.
And those are similar things I think often for many people that have to pick plays, whether it's for a festival or to do in any way, shape, or form. There's a lot of crossover on that, and not enough playwrights, I think, kind of know what a lot of those are, right? There are often scripts that are so fantastic that would have so many more opportunities if they had like 2 fewer characters, or these very basic sort of things.
A better title.
Right, exactly. There are some things like that.
Would love a better title.
Exactly. That of course you can make a choice to say, no, I need to tell this story with 8 characters, and I'm choosing that I'm going to limit the interest in my piece to theaters that can produce a play right now with 8 characters, right? But then that can be an informed choice that the playwright's making, and not a choice that's just born out of, I just want to tell this story that has 8 characters in it. And that's just obviously one example, but I do think playwrights have so much agency in that area. If they take advantage of it.
They do, and I do hope that's something, it's been a while since I looked at our American Stage website, so I will still claim newbieship in this, but I was always so good about putting on our website for folks who were interested in submitting, here's what we, very specific, and down to cast size.
Oh, interesting.
Because I knew my budget.
And
So I knew, I'm like, if you really want me to take it seriously, I'm not saying don't write the play with 100 people. I'm saying submit to us the one you wrote with 4.
Right, exactly.
Or
with 100 characters where everyone can double
right.
or triple or
It also just lets me know who's actually reading that. I'm like, did you read our submission stuff? Because if you just blew by it, then I know that you didn't take that time. And I also get it, like as a writer, when I submit, sometimes you're like just going. But I'm like, no, read the thing.
Read the thing.
Take 5 minutes to read the thing to know if this is a wasted. We're not. There's no fee base for their submissions for Lev. They were just free submissions, but a lot of those.
Though they are.
They are. There's a lot of fee submission, and so So I'm like, before you pay your other $15, you
Yeah,
know,
right,
just go
right, it
find
can add
out.
up.
I was like, find out if this is actually something they even want to look at in the first place. So yeah, and do a little research on your theater. Look at the history
Absolutely.
of programming. I'm like, to
Yeah.
know. Oh, they only do Shakespeare. I probably shouldn't go here. You know.
Is there any last thought or any last thing that you feel like you want to say to the world who watches the interview?
I mean, I just hope everybody will come to Lift Every Voice, and I hope you guys come to Lift
Yeah,
Every Voice. And
absolutely.
I mean, this was a great conversation.
Yeah, it was.
I would have
I
had
know, we
this.
could
I would have
talk
had this
for hours.
conversation without the camera. Like,
Fine.
yeah. I would have easily had this conversation like that. So thanks for
Yeah,
doing it. Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you.